Both engines exploded at 24,000 feet. 198 passengers. No power. No options. Then the co-pilot saw her NASA hoodie. Her father, that's Viper's daughter. Captain Hayes turned to the 11-year-old girl. Call sign Viper, you need this kid. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The sun was setting over the Mojave Desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange, purple, and deep red. The kind of sunset that makes you stop whatever you are doing and just stare in wonder at the beauty of nature. The kind of sunset that reminds you how vast and magnificent the world truly is. Colonel David Chen stood at the edge of runway 22 left with his 9-year-old daughter Lily. His hand rested gently on her small shoulder, and he could feel her warmth through the fabric of her purple NASA hoodie. The hoodie was too warm for the desert heat even as evening approached, but Lily wore it everywhere. It had been his hoodie first, from his days at NASA Dryden Flight Research Center before he transferred back to the Air Force. Now it was hers. It swallowed her small frame, with the sleeves rolled up multiple times, but she wore it with fierce pride. Lily was small for her age. At 9 years old, she stood barely 4 feet tall and weighed maybe 70 pounds soaking wet. Her dark hair was pulled back in 2 neat French braids that her mother had woven that morning before leaving for work. Wire-rimmed glasses that were slightly too large for her face kept sliding down her nose, and she had developed a habit of pushing them back up with one finger every few minutes. Her brown eyes were fixed on the F-22 Raptor sitting on the runway 200 yards away, gleaming in the dying sunlight. That aircraft represented everything her father did. Everything he was. Everything he risked. A test pilot, someone who flew broken planes on purpose to learn how they failed, someone who deliberately disabled critical systems and then tried to recover the aircraft to prove whether survival was possible, someone who put his life on the line every single day to make flying safer for everyone else. "Dad," Lily said quietly, her voice barely audible over the constant desert wind, "why do you keep flying broken planes?" "Mom says it is too dangerous. She says you have nothing left to prove. She says you should fly normal planes like regular pilots do." Colonel Chen knelt down so he was at eye level with his daughter. His olive-green flight suit rustled in the breeze. The patches on his chest told a complex story: Air Force Test Pilot School. NASA. Multiple combat deployment ribbons. Awards for valor and exceptional service. But right now, in this moment, none of that mattered. Right now, he was not Colonel Chen or call sign Viper. He was just a father trying to explain his life's work to his 9-year-old daughter. "Because someone has to, sweetheart," he said gently, choosing his words carefully. "If we do not test how planes fail, we cannot make them safer. Every flight I make, every broken system I test, every emergency situation I practice and survive, that gives us data. That gives us knowledge. And that knowledge saves lives. Maybe hundreds of lives, maybe thousands over the years. People who will never know their flight was a little bit safer because I flew a broken plane and survived long enough to write a detailed report about what went wrong and how I recovered. But what if your plane crashes? What if you do not make it back? What about me and Mom?" He smiled at her. That familiar smile that made her feel safe even when she was scared. "That is exactly why I train so hard. That is why I practice every single scenario thousands of times until it becomes muscle memory. So when something actually goes wrong in the air, when a real emergency happens, my hands know exactly what to do even when my brain is terrified." Muscle memory. Training, preparation, repetition until perfection. That is what separates pilots who survive from pilots who do not. Lily looked up at the F-22 Raptor again, studying its sleek lines and aggressive stance. Tomorrow morning at 0600 hours, her father would climb into that cockpit. He would strap himself in. He would take off into the clear desert sky with deliberately damaged flight controls. Hydraulic systems would be disabled one by one. Control surfaces would malfunction on command. It was a test to see if pilots could recover from cascading system failures. It was dangerous. It was necessary. It was what he did. It was who he was. "I want to learn," she said suddenly. The words came out in a rush, like she had been holding them in for a very long time and could not contain them anymore. "I want to know what you know. I want to understand how planes work and how to fly them and how to save them when everything goes wrong. I want to be like you." Colonel Chen studied his daughter's face very carefully. This was not a child's passing fancy. This was not hero worship or wanting to impress daddy. He saw something much deeper in her eyes. Real determination, genuine intelligence, a hunger to understand and learn and master complex things. The exact same hunger he had felt at her age when he first discovered aviation and knew with absolute certainty what he wanted to do with his life. He made a decision in that moment that would change both of their lives forever. A decision that would break multiple federal regulations and violate laws he had sworn to uphold. A decision that could get him court-martialed and cost him his career. A decision that would eventually save 198 lives 2 years and 6 months in the future. "Okay," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure nobody was close enough to overhear. "I will teach you everything I know. But this has to stay absolutely between us. This is our secret. Your mother cannot know. The Air Force cannot know. The FAA definitely cannot know. If anyone finds out I am teaching a 9-year-old to fly, I will lose my pilot license instantly. I could be court-martialed. I could go to prison. Do you understand how serious this is?" Lily nodded solemnly, her young face showing wisdom beyond her years. "I understand completely. I will not tell anyone. Not Mom. Not my friends. Nobody. I promise on my life." "What will you teach me?" "Everything," he said with conviction. "How to read instruments and understand what they are telling you, how to calculate fuel consumption and weight and balance, how to plan a flight from start to finish, how to navigate using all the tools available, how to communicate with air traffic control using proper procedures and phraseology, how to handle emergencies of every type. How to fly when the weather turns bad and visibility drops to nothing. How to land when the engines quit and you have no power. How to save an aircraft when absolutely everything is going wrong at once and everyone else has given up all hope of survival." He paused, then continued with even greater intensity. "Because someday, Lily, and I know this as certainly as I know the sun will rise tomorrow, someday you might be on a commercial flight when disaster strikes. You might be just a passenger, just a little kid sitting in coach, but you might be the only person on that entire aircraft who knows what to do. And when that moment comes, and believe me it will come, I want you to be completely ready. I want you to have the knowledge and the skills and the confidence to save lives. Even if you are just a passenger, even if you are just a kid. You can make the difference between everyone dying and everyone walking away alive." That conversation under the desert sunset was the beginning of something extraordinary. The beginning of 3 years of secret training that would violate virtually every regulation in the Federal Aviation Administration Handbook. 3 years of weekend trips to remote airfields in Nevada and Arizona where Colonel Chen's old Air Force buddies looked the other way and let a 9-year-old girl log real flight hours in actual aircraft. 3 years of midnight simulator sessions using military-grade equipment that civilians were absolutely not supposed to access. 3 years of a father methodically, systematically passing every single ounce of his accumulated knowledge and experience to his daughter. By age 10, Lily Chen had logged 150 hours of real flight time in small Cessna aircraft. 150 hours. That is more than many adults who earn their private pilot licenses. By age 11, that number had climbed to 212 hours. She had practiced every emergency procedure in the aviation handbook and many that were not. Engine failures at various altitudes. Complete electrical failures. Lost communications, instrument failures, severe weather, forced landings in fields and on roads, night flying. Everything her father could possibly teach her, she learned. And 2 months before his death, Colonel David Viper Chin did something that would have gotten him immediately arrested if anyone in authority had found out. He took his 11-year-old daughter to a professional Boeing flight simulator facility in Seattle. The kind of facility that major airlines pay enormous sums of money to use for pilot training, the kind that costs $10,000 per hour to operate. He called in favors from old friends and former colleagues. He used connections from his NASA days and his time at Boeing as a consultant. And he got his daughter certified to use a full-motion Boeing 737-800 simulator, the exact same equipment that United Airlines pilots train on before they are allowed to fly passengers. Then he programmed a very specific scenario into the simulator computer and made Lily fly it. Again and again and again. The scenario was called, Dual Engine Failure at Cruise Altitude, Commercial Jet. He made her practice it 43 times over 6 weeks. Different weather conditions, different aircraft weights, different altitudes. Different distances to the nearest suitable airport. Every possible variation he could think of. Until she could glide a completely powerless Boeing 737 to a safe emergency landing while half asleep. Until her hands moved automatically to exactly the right controls without any conscious thought, until there was absolutely zero hesitation even when faced with the most dire emergency imaginable. On their very last simulator session together, in the quiet hours after midnight when the facility was officially closed, Colonel Chen sat in the instructor's station watching his daughter fly a perfect emergency approach after losing both engines at 24,000 feet. She brought the aircraft down through clouds, found the runway, configured for landing at exactly the right moments, and touched down smoothly with just 8 feet of runway to spare. When the simulator motion stopped and the screens went dark, he climbed into the cockpit and looked at his daughter with undisguised pride in something else. Something that almost looked like premonition or prophecy. "Lily," he said very seriously, "you are going to be the best pilot in the entire world someday. Better than me. Better than anyone currently flying. But the world will not let you demonstrate that yet because you are just a kid. The FAA has rules. Age limits. Certification requirements. So you are going to have to wait and be patient. Keep studying every day. Keep learning and improving. Stay sharp and ready. And when the moment finally comes, and I promise you with absolute certainty that it will come, you will know exactly what to do." "What moment, Dad?" Lily had asked innocently. "The moment when everyone else freezes in panic and terror. The moment when highly trained professional pilots look at a situation and think this is impossible, we are all going to die. The moment when you are the only person on that aircraft who can save them. That moment will come. I promise you. I can feel it. And when it does, you need to remember absolutely everything I have taught you. Trust your training. Trust your instincts. Trust yourself. And save everyone." 6 weeks later, Colonel David Viper Chin died when the F-22 Raptor he was test flying suffered catastrophic engine failure at 40,000 feet over the Mojave Desert. He ejected successfully according to procedure, but his parachute malfunctioned during deployment. He fell nearly 8 miles and died instantly on impact with the desert floor. His last radio transmission to Edwards Control Tower was calm and absolutely professional even as his aircraft was literally disintegrating around him at supersonic speed. "Engine failure, total flameout, cannot recover, ejecting now. Tell my wife I love her. Tell my daughter she is ready. Tell Lily to keep flying. Tell her the moment will come." At his funeral with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery, 9-year-old Lily Chin wore her purple NASA hoodie despite her mother's protests that she should wear something more formal. She stood at rigid attention in her child-sized dress uniform that the Air Force had made especially for her. She did not cry during the ceremony even though her heart was breaking. She stood perfectly still while the honor guard performed the flag folding ceremony with military precision. She saluted with her small hand when the bugler played taps. And when they handed her mother the triangular folded American flag, Lily made a silent promise to her father's memory. "I will be ready, Dad. I promise you. When the moment comes, when everyone else freezes, I will remember every single thing you taught me. I will save them. I will make you proud. I swear it on your grave. 2 years and 6 months later, on a perfect autumn Wednesday afternoon, that moment would arrive on United Airlines Flight 872 from Denver to Chicago. And 198 souls would depend on an 11-year-old girl in a purple NASA hoodie remembering everything her dead father had taught her. Part 1, A Perfect Wednesday in Denver. Wednesday, October 18, 2023. Denver International Airport, Gate 47. 1:45 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. It was the absolute perfect kind of autumn day that makes people fall hopelessly in love with Colorado. The sky was an impossible shade of crystalline blue that you never see anywhere else in America. Not a single cloud marred its perfection. The Rocky Mountains stood crisp and clear and magnificent on the western horizon, their peaks already dusted with the first light snow of the approaching winter season. The air was cool and wonderfully clean, carrying just the faintest hint of pine trees from the mountain forests. The official weather observation at Denver International Airport read as follows: temperature 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds from the west at 8 knots, visibility unlimited, extending more than 50 miles in all directions. Barometric pressure steady at 30.12 inches. No precipitation. No turbulence. No significant weather of any kind. Weather conditions were officially listed as KAVU in the meteorological database. Clear and visibility unlimited. Pilot shorthand for absolutely perfect flying weather. The kind of conditions when flying is pure joy. United Airlines Flight 872 was a completely routine Wednesday afternoon departure. Denver to Chicago O'Hare International. Scheduled departure time 2:15 p.m. Scheduled flight time 2 hours and 15 minutes. Distance 915 statute miles. A standard milk run route that United flies multiple times every single day of the year, nothing special, nothing unusual. Just another routine scheduled flight on a perfect autumn day. The aircraft assigned to Flight 872 was a Boeing 737-800 with registration number November 38451. It was 6 years old, having been manufactured in May 2017 at Boeing's primary production facility in Renton, Washington. In commercial airline terms, 6 years old is practically brand new. The aircraft had accumulated approximately 15,000 total flight hours, which is nothing for a plane designed to fly 100,000 hours over a 30-year service life. The Boeing 737-800 was equipped with the latest generation avionics and navigation systems. Modern flight management computers, advanced weather radar. Digital engine controls. Sophisticated autopilot capable of flying the aircraft from takeoff to landing with minimal pilot intervention. And most importantly, twin CFM International CFM 56-7B turbofan engines mounted under the wings. The CFM 56 engine is quite literally one of the most reliable and proven jet engines ever designed and manufactured. More than 30,000 CFM 56 engines have been built since the design was first certified in 1979. Collectively, these engines have accumulated well over 1 billion flight hours. 1 billion. That is more flight experience than any other commercial jet engine in history. The statistical failure rate is extraordinarily low. Approximately 0.003 failures per thousand engine flight hours. In plain English, these engines almost never fail. You are more likely to be struck by lightning twice than to experience a CFM 56 engine failure. November 38451 had just completed its scheduled D-check maintenance inspection only 3 days earlier. A D-check is the most comprehensive and expensive maintenance inspection that any commercial aircraft undergoes. It happens roughly every 6 to 8 years depending on flight hours and cycles. The aircraft is essentially taken apart down to its basic components and then meticulously reassembled. Every system is tested. Every component is examined under microscopes and X-ray machines. Every wire and rivet and bolt is inspected. Every part with limited life is replaced. The D-check for November 38451 had been performed at United's largest maintenance facility located in San Francisco International Airport. The inspection took 23 days and cost United Airlines approximately $4 million. The maintenance chief who personally signed the final approval was a man named Robert Santiago. 61 years old. 32 years maintaining commercial jet aircraft. He knew Boeing 737s better than he knew his own house. He could recognize problems by sound and smell that instruments would miss. Robert Santiago would never, under any circumstances whatsoever, sign approval for an aircraft to return to passenger service if he had even the smallest doubt about its airworthiness. His signature on that maintenance release form meant one thing and one thing only: this aircraft is completely safe to fly passengers. Period. No qualifications. No reservations. The pre-flight inspection that morning showed both engines running perfectly smooth during taxi out of the overnight parking area. No unusual vibrations. No odd noises. No anomalous readings on any instruments. Both engines reached full power within specifications during the test run. Everything was exactly by the book. Exactly as it should be. But here is the terrible truth about aviation safety. Nothing is ever 100% certain. Nothing is ever completely risk-free. And sometimes, very rarely, despite everyone doing everything exactly right, the impossible happens anyway. Captain Rebecca Hayes. Captain Rebecca Hayes arrived at the United Airlines crew briefing room at 1:45 p.m. Mountain Time, exactly 30 minutes before Flight 872's scheduled departure. She was a firm believer in always being early. Always, never late, never rushing, never leaving anything to chance. In her 34 years as a professional pilot, Rebecca had never once been late for a flight assignment. Never called in sick at the last minute. Never left her first officer or flight attendants wondering where their captain was. She took pride in her absolute reliability and professionalism. Rebecca was 56 years old, though most people meeting her for the first time guessed she was at least 5 years younger. Her silver-gray hair was pulled back in a neat professional bun, not a single hair out of place. Her United Airlines uniform was crisp and perfectly pressed, looking like it had just come from the dry cleaners even though she had worn it for a full day yesterday. 4 gold stripes on her dark blue epaulets indicated her rank as captain. A small set of gold pilot wings with a tiny diamond embedded in the center marked 25 years of service with United Airlines. She had 19,417 hours of total flight time logged in her career. She knew this number exactly because she kept meticulous personal records of every single flight, going all the way back to her first solo flight at age 16. 19,000 hours. That meant she had spent the equivalent of more than 2 full continuous years of her life sitting in an aircraft cockpit. 2 entire years' worth of minutes and hours watching instruments, talking to air traffic control, monitoring weather, managing fuel, and keeping passengers safe. Before United Airlines, Rebecca had flown for the Air National Guard for 8 years, piloting C-130 Hercules transport planes. Before that, she had learned to fly in her father's beat-up old Cessna 172 at a tiny grass airstrip in rural Kansas. She soloed for the first time on her 16th birthday. Earned her private pilot license at 17. Commercial license at 18. The Air Force accepted her application when she was 22, and she never looked back. She had flown the Denver to Chicago route exactly 1,234 times over her career. She had memorized this number because her husband had joked about it over dinner last week, saying she could probably fly that route in her sleep and she would know every single cloud between Denver and Chicago by its first name. He was not entirely wrong. Rebecca knew this route intimately. Every landmark, every navigation waypoint, every radio frequency change, every common turbulence area, every potential weather pattern. The route was burned into her memory. She could recite the entire flight plan without looking at any charts or computer displays. Among her colleagues at United, both pilots and flight attendants, Rebecca had earned a strong reputation as someone who went strictly by the book. Every time, without exception. She followed all procedures to the absolute letter. She never cut corners. She never took unnecessary risks. She never deviated from standard operating procedures unless there was a genuine emergency that required it. Some of the younger pilots, especially the newly hired ones straight out of regional airlines, thought she was too rigid and conservative. Too old school, too by the book. But the experienced pilots, the ones who had been flying for 20 or 30 years, they all respected Rebecca Hayes enormously. They knew from hard experience that following the book, following procedures, following regulations, that is exactly what keeps you alive for 34 years without a single accident or serious incident. Today she reviewed the computerized flight plan with her usual methodical precision and attention to detail. Weather forecast, absolutely perfect conditions the entire route. Fuel load, full tanks plus regulatory reserves plus company reserves. Total fuel weight 42,600 pounds. Aircraft weight and balance, well within all limits. Alternate airports identified and evaluated, multiple excellent options available. Route, standard high-altitude jet route through Kansas and Iowa. Everything looked exactly the way it should look for a routine flight. Weather looks absolutely perfect all the way to Chicago, she said to her first officer as he entered the briefing room. Should be smooth air the entire way. No weather. No turbulence. No delays. Maybe we will actually arrive early for once and make the gate agents happy. First Officer Marcus Webb. First Officer Marcus Webb had arrived at the crew briefing room 10 minutes before Captain Hayes, continuing his long-standing personal habit of always being early. Old military habits die very hard, and Marcus had spent 12 years in the Navy before transitioning to commercial aviation. Punctuality was deeply ingrained. Marcus was 42 years old. Tall and lean and obviously fit, still maintaining the excellent physical conditioning he had developed during his years as a Navy fighter pilot. He had flown F/A-18 Super Hornet fighters off the deck of the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln. 187 carrier landings during his Navy career. 43 combat missions over Iraq during the Second Gulf War. 3,000 hours flying time in high-performance military jets before he left the Navy and joined United Airlines 5 years ago. He had 11,000 total flight hours now. 3,000 military in fighters, 8,000 commercial in Boeing aircraft. He was currently working toward earning his ATP certificate, the Airline Transport Pilot Rating, which is the highest level of pilot certification available. Once he had his ATP, he would become eligible for upgrade to captain. Another year or two, and he would have his 4th stripe and be flying from the left seat. Marcus had a well-deserved reputation among everyone who knew him for staying absolutely calm under pressure. That came directly from his military fighter pilot experience. When you have successfully landed a 30-ton fighter jet on a moving aircraft carrier deck at night in bad weather with your fuel gauge reading practically empty, pretty much everything else in aviation seems reasonably manageable by comparison. Commercial flying was peaceful and relaxing compared to carrier operations. He had flown with Captain Rebecca Hayes dozens of times over the past 2 years. They had developed excellent cockpit coordination and communication. Rebecca was precise and professional and competent. She communicated clearly. She listened to input from her first officer instead of having a huge ego like some senior captains. She did not second-guess or micromanage. Marcus respected her completely and genuinely enjoyed flying with her. He pulled up the detailed weather briefing on his company iPad and reviewed the meteorological conditions one final time even though he had already checked them twice that morning. High-pressure system dominating the entire central United States, clear skies everywhere. Light winds aloft. No turbulence forecast anywhere along their route. Temperature and dew point spread indicating extremely dry air with absolutely no chance of fog or precipitation. He methodically checked all the alternate airports just to be thorough and complete, even though he was quite certain they would not need any alternates today. Front Range Airport located northeast of Denver in case they had issues right after takeoff. Cheyenne Regional Airport to the north in Wyoming, Colorado Springs Airport to the south, Goodland Municipal Airport in Kansas to the east, all of them currently reporting perfect weather, all runways clear and available. All navigation aids operating normally. Perfect day for flying, he agreed with Rebecca. Let's make it a completely boring flight. Get everyone to Chicago safely and go home. In aviation, boring is absolutely wonderful. Boring is ideal. Boring means nothing goes wrong. Boring means all systems function perfectly as designed. Boring means passengers arrive safely and never even realize how much skill and constant attention went into making their flight completely uneventful. Boring is what every professional pilot secretly hopes for every single time they climb into a cockpit. At 2 p.m. exactly, Rebecca and Marcus left the crew briefing room and walked together through the busy terminal concourse toward Gate 47. They greeted the gate agents professionally and pleasantly. They smiled at passengers who were waiting to board. They projected quiet confidence and competence and experience. They looked like exactly what they were, highly experienced professional pilots who had done this same routine 10,000 times before and would do it 10,000 more times in the future. Neither of them had even the slightest idea or premonition that in exactly 22 minutes, they would be facing an aviation emergency so severe and catastrophic that it should kill them instantly along with everyone else on their aircraft. An emergency that would test absolutely everything they had ever learned about flying. An emergency that would require help from the most unlikely and impossible source imaginable. An 11-year-old girl in a purple NASA hoodie who had learned to fly from her dead father. The girl who knew too much. Lily Chen sat completely alone in the crowded gate area at Gate 47, reading a technical aviation manual that most adults would find utterly incomprehensible. She had been sitting in that same plastic chair for 45 minutes now, ever since her mother had dropped her off at the unaccompanied minor check-in desk near the main security checkpoint. She was 11 years old, though most people meeting her for the first time initially assumed she was younger, perhaps 8 or 9, because of her exceptionally small size and petite build. 4 feet 8 inches tall. 85 pounds, tiny for her age. Dark hair pulled back tightly in 2 neat French braids that her mother had woven with practiced hands that morning before leaving for her nursing shift at Denver Health Medical Center. Wire-rimmed glasses that were just slightly too large for her small face and had a persistent tendency to slide down her nose every few minutes. A faded purple NASA hoodie that was obviously too big for her, with the sleeves rolled up multiple times. The NASA patch sewn onto the left sleeve was old and frayed badly at the edges. It showed its age. The hoodie had belonged to her father originally. Colonel David Chen had worn this exact hoodie during his assignment at NASA's Dryden Flight Research Center in the late 1990s before he transferred back to Air Force active duty. When he died 2 years ago, Lily had claimed it immediately as her own personal treasure. She wore it constantly despite her mother's frequent protests that it was far too big and she really should get something new that actually fit her properly. Lily absolutely refused. This hoodie was her direct connection to her father. His smell still lingered faintly in the fabric. She would wear it every single day until it literally fell apart into pieces. Her small navy blue backpack sat upright at her feet, stuffed completely full but organized with meticulous care. No random clutter. No junk. Everything inside had a specific purpose. The backpack contained technical aviation manuals that would cost hundreds of dollars each if you tried to purchase them new through official channels. Boeing 737-800 Aircraft Systems Manual, Engine Failure Emergency Procedures Handbook, Advanced Navigation and Flight Planning Guide, detailed aeronautical charts covering every mile of airspace between Denver and Chicago. There were also multiple spiral-bound notebooks filled completely with Lily's careful, precise handwriting. Flight performance calculations worked out longhand using formulas most airline pilots would not recognize. Weight and balance equations for different aircraft loading scenarios. Navigation solutions plotted manually using nothing but a compass, ruler, and calculator. Performance data tables she had created herself through hundreds of hours of study. And tucked carefully in a zippered side pocket, wrapped protectively in a gallon-size plastic bag to keep it safe from any moisture, was her father's old brown leather pilot logbook. The actual physical paper logbook he had used to record his flights from 1995 until 2010, before he finally switched to computerized electronic logging like most modern pilots. The leather was worn smooth from years of handling. The pages were yellowed with age. And incredibly, impossibly, it still carried the faint ghost of her father's cologne, even after all these years and even after his death. Lily was traveling today as an official unaccompanied minor passenger from Denver to Chicago O'Hare to visit her Aunt Rachel for fall break week. 1 week away from school. 1 week away from the house in suburban Denver that felt far too empty and quiet now that her father was permanently gone. 1 week where maybe, hopefully, she could talk to someone who truly understood how desperately much she still missed him every single day. While waiting patiently for the boarding process to begin, she read with complete absorption from Boeing 737 engine failure procedures, advanced emergency management. It was an official Boeing training manual designed specifically for airline simulator instructors and check airmen. Graduate-level technical material covering catastrophic emergency scenarios that most commercial airline pilots would never encounter even once during their entire 30-year careers: dual engine failure, complete electrical system failure, multiple simultaneous hydraulic system failures. The absolute worst-case emergencies that aviation safety authorities pray desperately never actually happen to real aircraft with real passengers. Lily read the dense technical prose with complete focus and understanding. Her lips moved very slightly as she mentally worked through the complex emergency procedures in her mind, visualizing each step. Her finger traced individual lines of text carefully, following the logic of decision trees and emergency checklists step by step. To any adult watching her casually, she probably looked like a child pretending to read something complicated to appear smart. But she actually understood every single word. Every technical term, every concept, every procedural step, because her father had taught her personally. The gate agent working Flight 872 noticed Lily during the pre-boarding process and walked over to her with a sympathetic, gentle smile. The agent's name tag identified her as Jennifer. She appeared to be in her mid-30s, with a friendly, professional demeanor. "Hi there, sweetie," Jennifer said warmly, kneeling down beside Lily's chair to be at the same eye level. "I'm Jennifer and I'll be taking special care of you today on your flight. I see you're traveling as an unaccompanied minor. Do you have your boarding pass ready?" Lily looked up from her technical manual and reached into her hoodie pocket to pull out her printed boarding pass. "Yes ma'am, I have it right here. Seat 12A. I specifically requested a window seat on the left side of the aircraft because that will give me an unobstructed view of the left engine nacelle during flight operations." Jennifer blinked in mild surprise at the unexpectedly technical language. "Watch the engine? That's quite an unusual request for a young passenger. Are you particularly interested in aviation and airplanes?" "Yes ma'am, very interested," Lily said seriously. "I have logged 73 commercial flights as a passenger and accumulated 212 hours of actual flight time at the controls of aircraft." Jennifer laughed pleasantly, assuming the child was confused about terminology. "Oh, you mean you have flown as a passenger 73 times? That certainly is a lot of traveling for someone your age. You must get frequent flyer miles." "No ma'am, I apologize for being unclear," Lily said politely but very firmly. "I mean I have personally logged 212 hours of actual flight time with my hands on the flight controls. Real flying, piloting aircraft. My father taught me to fly starting when I was 8 years old. He was a professional pilot." Jennifer's friendly smile faltered noticeably. That seemed completely impossible. 8-year-olds cannot fly planes legally. That would violate multiple federal regulations. But this child said it with such absolute confidence and specificity. She obviously believed what she was saying. "Well, that's just wonderful that your father is a pilot. Is he traveling with you to Chicago today?" A visible shadow crossed Lily's young face. The bright light in her eyes dimmed noticeably and her expression became sad. "No ma'am. My father died 2 years ago in a test flight accident." But he taught me absolutely everything he knew before he died. Everything about flying, everything about handling emergencies, everything about how to save an aircraft when things go catastrophically wrong. Jennifer felt her heart genuinely break for this little girl sitting alone. "Oh sweetheart, I am so very sorry for your loss. What was your father's name?" "Colonel David Chen, United States Air Force. His call sign was Viper. He was a test pilot assigned to Edwards Air Force Base in California. He flew damaged and broken aircraft deliberately to study exactly how they failed and whether recovery was possible. He completed 87 successful test flights with deliberately malfunctioning planes and he survived all of them. Until test flight number 88. That one killed him instantly." Jennifer had absolutely no idea who Colonel David Chen was. She had never heard the call sign Viper mentioned before. But she could see and feel the fierce pride radiating from this little girl's eyes when she talked about her father. Pride mixed with deep grief. Love mixed with permanent loss. "Your father sounds like he was truly an amazing and brave man," Jennifer said very gently. "He was the best pilot in the entire world," Lily said with complete conviction and zero doubt. "And he spent 3 years teaching me to be exactly like him before he died." The request that changed everything. When the boarding process officially began, Jennifer personally escorted Lily down the covered jetway toward the aircraft, following standard United Airlines policy for unaccompanied minor passengers. Make absolutely sure they board safely. Make sure the flight attendants are clearly informed about their presence. Make sure proper arrangements exist for someone to meet them at the destination airport. As they reached the aircraft entry door where passengers were beginning to stream aboard, Lily suddenly stopped walking and looked up at Jennifer with those serious, intelligent brown eyes behind the wire-rimmed glasses. "Excuse me, ma'am," Lily said with characteristic politeness. "Would it be possible for me to ask the flight crew a very quick question? I promise it will only take 1 moment and I won't delay boarding." Jennifer smiled warmly at the earnest child. "Of course, sweetie. Let me check if the pilots have a moment available before we complete pre-flight procedures." The lead flight attendant working Flight 872 was a woman named Sarah Mitchell who had been flying for United Airlines for 15 years. She was standing professionally at the aircraft door greeting each passenger as they boarded with a warm smile and welcome. Jennifer spoke to her quietly and discreetly. "Sarah, we have an unaccompanied minor who would like to say a quick hello to the pilots if they're not too busy. Is the cockpit accessible right now?" Sarah looked down at Lily with a genuinely warm smile. "Sure, no problem at all. Let me just knock and see if they're ready for a quick visitor before we finish pre-flight." She knocked gently on the locked cockpit door using the standard coded knock pattern. "Captain, First Officer. We have a young passenger out here who would like to say hello very briefly if you have a moment." First Officer Marcus Webb opened the heavy cockpit door and looked down to see a very small girl standing there in the doorway. Purple NASA hoodie far too large for her frame. Wire-rimmed glasses sliding down her nose, extremely serious expression on her young face. She looked like she might be 10 years old at most. Maybe 11. "Hello there," he said kindly, his voice genuinely warm and welcoming. "What's your name, and how can we help you today?" "My name is Lily Chen, sir," she said clearly and professionally. "My father was Colonel David Chen, United States Air Force, call sign Viper. He was a test pilot stationed at Edwards Air Force Base. He flew experimental test flights deliberately to study aircraft failure modes and recovery procedures." Marcus Webb completely froze in place. His hand on the door went absolutely still. His eyes widened noticeably. He stared at this tiny child standing in front of him in genuine shock. "Your father was Viper," he said very slowly, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "The Viper? The legendary test pilot who flew that damaged F-22 Raptor with half the primary flight control surfaces completely disabled?" "Yes sir," Lily confirmed simply. "That was my father." Marcus had heard countless stories and legends about Viper throughout his entire 12-year Navy fighter pilot career. Every single military pilot in every branch of service knew the stories. The man who could successfully fly absolutely anything. The pilot who landed aircraft that by all rights should have crashed and killed everyone aboard. The test pilot who personally volunteered for the most dangerous and potentially lethal test missions because someone had to prove scientifically whether emergency recovery was actually possible. I met your father once personally, Marcus said quietly, his voice filled with genuine respect. Joint multi-service training exercise at Nellis Air Force Base about 5 years ago. He gave an incredibly detailed presentation on advanced emergency procedures and aircraft recovery techniques. He was absolutely brilliant. I have honestly never seen anyone who understood flying at such a deep level the way he did. I am so very sorry for your loss. Thank you very much, sir, Lily said. Her voice remained steady and professional and controlled, exactly like her father had trained her. Never show weakness to anyone. Never let them see you cry or break down. May I please ask you something? Of course. What can I do for you today? Would it possibly be permissible for me to sit in the cockpit jump seat during this flight? I genuinely want to watch you fly and learn about Boeing 737 systems and operations. My father taught me extensively about aircraft, but I have never been inside an actual 737 cockpit before. I absolutely promise I will be completely quiet and I won't touch anything at all, and I will leave immediately if you need me to for any reason. Marcus turned around to look at Captain Rebecca Hayes sitting in the left seat. Rebecca had been listening carefully to the entire conversation from her position. She turned around in her seat to look directly at this small girl standing hopefully at their cockpit door. There was something genuinely different about her. A seriousness and maturity and focus that did not match her young age and tiny size. The weather is absolutely perfect today, Rebecca said to Marcus thoughtfully. Nothing at all complicated about this particular flight. Straight and level cruise the entire way to Chicago. Why not let Viper's daughter sit here and watch? Maybe we can inspire the next generation of pilots. Marcus nodded in agreement. He looked back at Lily with a genuine smile. Sure, you can definitely sit in the jump seat for this flight. But you absolutely must stay buckled in securely during takeoff and landing. And if we need you to leave the cockpit for any reason whatsoever, you leave immediately without asking any questions. Is that clearly understood? Lily's young face lit up with genuine joy and excitement. The first real smile she had shown all day. Yes, sir. I understand completely and I will follow all instructions exactly. Thank you so very much. Sarah helped Lily carefully into the cockpit and showed her how to properly secure herself in the jump seat. The jump seat was a small folding seat mounted on the cockpit wall behind and between the two main pilot seats. It had a 4-point safety harness similar to a race car. Lily climbed up with practiced ease and buckled herself in efficiently and quickly. The movements were smooth and practiced, like she had done this exact thing many times before. Rebecca glanced back at her. You have definitely sat in a jump seat before, haven't you? Yes, ma'am, many times, Lily confirmed. My father took me flying with him whenever he possibly could. He started teaching me to read instruments and understand what they meant when I was 8. He taught me emergency procedures. He taught me how aircraft systems work. He told me I needed to understand every system and every procedure and every possible emergency because you never know when that knowledge will literally save your life. Your father was absolutely right about that, Rebecca said approvingly. Knowledge and training and preparation are exactly what keep you alive when everything starts going wrong. Lily pulled her technical manual from her backpack and settled in comfortably to continue reading while the pilots completed their detailed pre-flight checks. The book was titled Boeing 737 Engine Failure Procedures, Advanced Emergency Management. Rebecca noticed the specific title and raised her eyebrows in surprise. That is extremely advanced graduate-level material. That's the exact manual we use in our simulator training for absolute worst-case scenarios. How did you possibly get a copy of that? My father special ordered it for me before he died, Lily explained simply. He made me study it cover to cover multiple times. He said someday I might desperately need to know how to handle a catastrophic emergency when everyone else was panicking. He made me memorize every procedure. Every decision tree, every recovery technique. Marcus shook his head slowly in amazement. Your dad was seriously hardcore about training. Most airline pilots never study material at that level of technical detail. My dad always said the difference between a good pilot who lives and a dead pilot is preparation and training, Lily said seriously. He told me you study the absolute worst-case scenarios so when they actually happen in real life, you don't freeze in panic. Your hands automatically know exactly what to do even when your brain is terrified. Rebecca and Marcus exchanged meaningful glances. This kid obviously worshipped her father completely. Obviously absorbed absolutely everything he taught her like a sponge. Let her sit here and learn and continue honoring his memory. What they did not know, could not possibly know, was that Lily Chen was not just honoring her father's memory through study. She was not reading advanced technical manuals purely out of intellectual curiosity or general interest in aviation. She was actively preparing. Because her father had made her a promise 2 years ago. He had told her with absolute certainty that the moment would come. The specific moment when everyone else would freeze in terror and she would be the only person who could save them. That promised moment was now exactly 22 minutes away from arriving. And when it finally did arrive, 198 human lives would depend entirely on an 11-year-old girl accurately remembering absolutely everything her dead father had taught her during 3 years of illegal secret training. 22 minutes of perfect routine. At 2:18 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, United Airlines Flight 872 received clearance for takeoff from Denver International Airport Tower Control. United 872, winds 340 at 8 knots, altimeter 3012, runway 34 right, you are cleared for takeoff, the tower controller's calm professional voice announced over the radio. United 872, cleared for takeoff runway 34 right, Rebecca acknowledged crisply, her hand already moving to advance the throttle levers smoothly forward. The two CFM56 turbofan engines spooled up rapidly to full takeoff power with their characteristic rising roar that passengers in the cabin could feel vibrating through their seats. The Boeing 737-800 began rolling down the long concrete runway, slowly at first, then accelerating rapidly. Faster and faster. Lily watched intently from the jump seat, her eyes tracking systematically across the instrument panel exactly the way her father had taught her. Airspeed indicator showing the numbers climbing steadily. 80 knots, 100 knots, 120 knots, 130. V1, Marcus called out clearly. The critical decision speed, the point of no return. After V1, they were absolutely committed to takeoff even if something went seriously wrong. There was no longer enough runway remaining to stop safely. Rotate, Marcus announced. Rebecca pulled back gently and smoothly on the control yoke. The nose wheel lifted gracefully off the runway. The main landing gear wheels followed a moment later. The aircraft was flying, climbing smoothly into the perfect blue Colorado sky. Clean. Smooth. Absolutely textbook perfect. Positive rate of climb, Marcus reported, watching the vertical speed indicator showing they were definitely climbing. Gear up, Rebecca commanded. Marcus raised the landing gear control lever decisively. The 3 green gear down indicator lights went dark. The landing wheels retracted smoothly into the fuselage with a solid mechanical thump that Lily could feel through the metal of her jump seat. The aircraft climbed steadily away from Denver International Airport, rising into the unlimited visibility. Below them, the city of Denver spread out like a detailed map. The Rocky Mountains to the west stood sharp and clear and magnificent against the perfect blue sky, every peak and valley visible in the crystal clear air. United 872, contact Denver departure on 124.3, the tower controller instructed. Denver departure 124.3, good day, Rebecca acknowledged. She switched radio frequencies with a quick turn of a knob. Denver departure, United 872 with you out of 2,500 feet, climbing as assigned. United 872, Denver departure, radar contact confirmed. Climb and maintain flight level 240. Proceed on course. Flight level 240, United 872, Rebecca confirmed. They climbed steadily through 5,000 feet altitude. Then 10,000. Rebecca disconnected the autopilot temporarily and flew manually for several minutes. She liked keeping her manual flying skills sharp and current. Feel the aircraft respond directly to her control inputs. The control yoke moved smoothly and responsively in her hands. The aircraft climbed at exactly the rate she commanded. At 18,000 feet, she smoothly re-engaged the autopilot system. The sophisticated flight computers would now handle the remainder of the climb to cruising altitude while she and Marcus monitored all the systems carefully and watched for any potential problems. Marcus methodically ran through the detailed cruise checklist, verbally confirming each item. Fuel quantity and flow, check. Cabin pressurization, check. Engine parameters normal and within limits. Flight controls, check. Navigation systems, check. Everything showed perfect green status across all the displays and instruments. Behind them in the main passenger cabin, the flight attendants began their standard beverage and snack service, moving down the aisles with their carts. The passengers settled into their seats comfortably for the 2-hour flight. Some opened books or magazines. Some worked on laptop computers. Some put in earbuds and closed their eyes for a nap. Some simply stared out the windows at the vast Colorado plains passing slowly below, the late afternoon sunlight painting long shadows across the landscape. In the cockpit jump seat, Lily Chen continued reading her advanced technical manual while occasionally glancing up at the instrument panel displays. She was actively memorizing everything she could see. The way the fuel flow gauges read. The way the engine temperature and pressure displays looked during normal operations. The way the altitude and airspeed changed gradually during the climb. Her father had taught her very specifically to watch constantly for patterns and changes. To notice small variations before they became large problems. Because small changes in instrument readings often signaled big problems developing if you caught them early enough. They passed through 20,000 feet smoothly. Then 22,000. Then 23,000 feet. At exactly 24,000 feet altitude, the autopilot leveled the aircraft off precisely at their assigned cruising altitude. The airspeed indicator stabilized at 0.78 Mach number, which translated to approximately 500 miles per hour. Completely normal cruise speed for a Boeing 737-800. Rebecca glanced at her wristwatch out of habit. 22 minutes elapsed since takeoff. Everything was running perfectly on schedule. In approximately 90 more minutes, they would begin their descent into Chicago. Another completely routine flight, another perfectly safe arrival. Exactly the way commercial aviation is supposed to work day after day. She happened to notice Lily staring intently at one specific instrument display on the center pedestal between the two pilot seats. The young girl's eyes were focused and her forehead was slightly wrinkled in concentration. "See something interesting there?" Rebecca asked pleasantly. Lily hesitated for just a moment, then spoke quietly and carefully. "Ma'am, the fuel flow indication on engine number 2 is fluctuating slightly. Just 5% variation. It is still well within normal acceptable parameters, but it is fluctuating when it should be holding perfectly steady." Marcus checked his primary flight display carefully, looking at the fuel flow gauge for the right engine. The digital numbers looked completely normal to him. The reading was well within the acceptable operating range specified in the aircraft manual. "Looks perfectly normal to me," he said. "Well within acceptable parameters and limits." "Yes sir, I know it is within limits," Lily said. "I am not suggesting anything is wrong. But my father taught me very specifically to watch constantly for unusual patterns. Small changes that might build into larger problems. He always said that instruments do not lie. If something is fluctuating when it should be steady, there is always a reason, even if we cannot see that reason yet. Rebecca smiled with approval. Your father taught you absolutely right. You have excellent instincts. We will definitely keep a close eye on that gauge. She made a mental note to monitor that particular fuel flow indicator closely during the flight. Probably nothing at all to worry about. Most likely just normal minor variations in fuel pump output. But the kid definitely had good instincts and was paying close attention. Viper had trained his daughter extremely well. Exactly 30 seconds later, without any warning whatsoever, the left engine exploded catastrophically. When everything goes wrong. The explosion was violent and sudden and absolutely terrifying. A massive deafening bang erupted from the left side of the aircraft. Not just loud. Shockingly, overwhelmingly loud, the kind of explosive sound that you feel physically in your chest and stomach. The kind of sound that makes your heart literally stop beating for a moment. The aircraft lurched violently hard to the right as the left engine's thrust disappeared instantly. The autopilot disconnected immediately with its characteristic warning chime. Multiple alarms began screaming urgently throughout the cockpit. Fire warning lights flashed bright red across the entire instrument panel like Christmas decorations. Master caution lights. Master warning lights. The cockpit lit up like an emergency room during a crisis. Engine 1 fire. Marcus shouted over the cacophony of alarms and warnings. Left engine fire warning. Rebecca's hands flew instantly to the controls. 3 decades of professional training took over completely. Her conscious mind stepped aside entirely and let her training drive her actions. Fire checklist. Execute engine fire procedure. Shut it down immediately. Marcus was already moving with practiced speed and precision. His hands worked the engine shutdown controls with the muscle memory developed from hundreds of simulator practice sessions. This was the engine fire drill they had practiced countless times. Now it was real. Fuel shut-off valve engine 1, closed. Cut off the fuel supply feeding the fire. Engine 1 fire handle, pulled. Activated the fire suppression bottle. Engine 1 fire extinguisher, discharged. Halon fire suppression agent flooded into the engine nacelle to smother the flames. The bright red engine fire warning light flickered once, twice, then went completely dark. The engine was totally dead now, but critically, the fire was contained and extinguished. They had successfully put it out. First crisis managed and controlled. Engine 1 secured and shut down, Marcus reported professionally. His voice was steady and controlled despite the massive adrenaline dump flooding through his system. Engine 2 is running normally. Aircraft is stable on single-engine operations. Rebecca had the aircraft firmly under her control. She trimmed the rudder to compensate for the asymmetric thrust. The right engine was still producing full power. The aircraft was flying stably. Not ideal. Not fun. But absolutely manageable. This was a scenario they had trained for extensively. The Boeing 737 was fully capable of flying safely on just one engine. This type of thing occasionally happened. Engines sometimes failed. That is exactly why commercial aircraft have 2 of them. She keyed her radio microphone. Denver Center, United 872, we have experienced an engine failure and fire. Declaring an emergency. Requesting immediate vectors back to Denver International. United 872, Denver Center copies your emergency declaration. The air traffic controller responded immediately, his voice suddenly more focused and alert. Turn left heading 270. Denver International is currently at your 12 o'clock position, distance 58 nautical miles. You are cleared direct to the airport. Descend and maintain 16,000 feet. Emergency response equipment is being alerted and will be standing by on your arrival. Heading 270, descend to 16,000, cleared direct Denver International, United 872, Rebecca acknowledged professionally. She began a gentle, controlled turn back toward Denver. Single engine failure, definitely serious, definitely not good, but completely manageable by any competent airline crew. They would return to Denver. Land safely. Figure out what caused the failure. Get the passengers on another aircraft. Everyone would be fine. And then, impossibly, the second engine began failing. It did not explode dramatically like the first one. That would almost have been better. Faster, clearer, more obvious. Instead, it just started slowly dying. Gradually deteriorating. Like watching someone slowly bleed to death. The instruments told the story clearly if you knew how to read them. Engine number 2 turbine temperature rising steadily and rapidly, internal vibration levels increasing dramatically. N1 compressor section speed fluctuating erratically when it should be rock steady. Thrust output decreasing even though the throttle position had not changed. Engine 2 is failing rapidly. Marcus said urgently. His voice rising now as the calm professional veneer began cracking slightly under the stress. N1 showing severe vibration levels. Temperature climbing dangerously. Thrust dropping. Rebecca's eyes snapped to the engine instruments. Marcus was absolutely right. The right engine was destroying itself internally. Catastrophic damage developing rapidly. The engine was coming apart. Then the right engine disintegrated completely. The same type of catastrophic turbine blade failure as the first engine, metal components that were supposed to spin smoothly at thousands of revolutions per minute now tearing themselves into pieces in a fraction of a second. Both engines were completely dead. The cockpit went eerily quiet. No engine noise. No mechanical sounds. Just the sound of air rushing past the aircraft's exterior. The sound of wind flowing over wings and fuselage, and somewhere behind them in the passenger cabin, the sound of 198 passengers beginning to realize that something was very, very seriously wrong. Rebecca keyed her microphone with forced calm. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. United 872, we have experienced dual engine failure. Both engines have flamed out completely. Unable to restart. 198 souls on board including crew. We are gliding with no power. There was a long pause on the radio frequency. Then the controller's voice came back slowly, like he could not quite believe what he had just heard. United 872, please confirm your emergency status. Did you report both engines failed? Affirmative, Denver Center. Rebecca said forcefully. Complete dual flameout. Both engines destroyed. We have zero thrust available. This aircraft is now an unpowered glider. United 872, understood, Roger. Stand by. Marcus was already desperately running the emergency engine restart procedures, following the emergency checklist step by step. Maybe they could get at least one engine restarted. Maybe there was still a chance. Fuel valves engine 1 and 2, check, opened and flowing. Ignition switches, engaged. Spark igniters firing. Rotating engines for windmill restart. Waiting desperately for the compressors to spool up from windmilling, waiting for ignition. Waiting for that beautiful moment when an engine catches and roars back to life and starts producing thrust again. Nothing happened. No ignition. No restart. No thrust. The engines were too severely damaged internally. They were not coming back. Ever. Negative restart on both engines, Marcus reported hollowly. His voice had lost its professional edge now. They are destroyed. They are not coming back, Captain. We are dead stick. Dead stick. The old aviation slang term for an aircraft with no engine power whatsoever. A glider. A piece of metal falling out of the sky with nothing but aerodynamics keeping it temporarily aloft before gravity inevitably won. Rebecca looked at the computerized glide performance calculator display on her navigation screen. She ran the numbers quickly in her mind. Mathematics that every professional pilot knows by heart, mathematics that would determine whether they lived or died in the next few minutes. Current altitude, 24,000 feet, which equals approximately 4.5 statute miles straight up. Glide ratio for Boeing 737, 17:1 under ideal conditions. Meaning for every mile of altitude, they could theoretically glide 17 miles horizontally. Maximum theoretical glide range, 76 statute miles from current position. Distance to Denver International Airport, 58 statute miles. The basic mathematics said they could make it. The textbook numbers said they had sufficient altitude. The computer display predicted they would reach Denver International with 18 miles of margin remaining. But Rebecca Hayes knew much better than to trust simple textbook mathematics. She had flown for 34 years. She knew the cruel difference between theoretical performance and brutal real-world reality. Headwinds. They were flying into headwind. That would cost them at least 10 miles of range. Maybe 12. Maneuvering energy losses. They would need to turn. Adjust heading. Navigate around terrain. Every turn bleeds energy and altitude. Another 5 miles minimum. Real-world glide ratio versus theoretical. The book said 17:1. Real aircraft with gear and flaps retracted might achieve 15:1 if everything was perfect. When they extended gear and flaps for landing, that would drop to maybe 12:1. Another 8 to 10 miles of range lost. They were going to fall short. At least 8 miles short, probably 10. And there was absolutely nothing except empty plains and scattered farms between their current position and Denver. No highways wide enough to land a 737. No dry lake beds. No emergency landing strips. No options. They were going to crash into the ground at 200 miles per hour. The aircraft would be destroyed instantly. Everyone would die. All 198 souls. Rebecca Hayes, who had flown safely for 34 years without a single accident or serious incident, was about to kill everyone on her aircraft. And there was absolutely nothing she could do to prevent it. Then she remembered the 11-year-old girl sitting quietly in the jump seat behind her. Rebecca's hands trembled on the control yoke. 24,000 feet. No engines. 198 souls. 0.8 miles short of the runway. She turned to look at Lily Chen sitting motionless in the jump seat. The 11-year-old girl's eyes were completely calm. Not panicked. Not crying. Just, watching, calculating. Lily, Rebecca said quietly, her voice cracking slightly. I need you to go back to your seat now and buckle in tight. We're going to crash land and... Ma'am, with respect, no we're not, Lily interrupted firmly. Her small voice carried absolute conviction. We can make Denver International if we adjust our glide profile properly. Marcus turned around sharply. Kid, I appreciate your optimism, but the math doesn't work. We're going to fall short by 8.3 miles at current descent rate and airspeed, Lily finished calmly. I've been calculating continuously since Engine 1 failed. But you're flying the textbook profile. My father taught me how to extend glide range beyond published parameters. Rebecca stared at this tiny child. How? Delay gear extension until absolutely necessary. Maintain 0.78 Mach instead of slowing early. Use shallow S-turns to bleed altitude over distance instead of steep descent. Optimize angle of attack for maximum lift-to-drag ratio. Lily's words came rapid-fire, precise, technical. The Boeing manual assumes conservative margins. We don't need conservative right now. We need maximum performance. She's right, Marcus said slowly, checking his calculations. If we stay fast and clean longer. Jesus, she might be right. Denver Center's voice crackled urgently. United 872, what are your intentions? We're clearing all traffic. Runway 34 right is yours. Rebecca keyed the mic. Denver Center, we're attempting to stretch our glide. We need every foot of altitude we can preserve. Understood, 872. Fire equipment standing by. Emergency declared. You are cleared any approach, any runway. The cockpit fell silent except for the whistling wind noise. Rebecca made her decision. Lily, stay where you are. Talk me through this. Marcus, monitor her instructions. If anything sounds wrong, speak up immediately. Yes ma'am, Lily said, her voice steady. She pulled her technical manual closer. Current altitude 23,200 feet. Distance to threshold 54 miles. We need to maintain current airspeed until passing through 15,000 feet. Rebecca held the aircraft rocksteady. Marcus, give me continuous distance and altitude callouts. 53 miles. 23,000 feet. Descent rate 1,800 feet per minute. In the cabin, passengers were beginning to panic. Flight attendant Sarah's voice came through the intercom, trying to sound calm but clearly terrified. Captain, the passengers are asking what's happening. What should I tell them? Rebecca took a deep breath. Tell them we've lost both engines but we're gliding toward Denver. Tell them to review safety cards and prepare for emergency landing. Tell them we have an expert helping us and we're going to make it. Lily's small fingers traced calculations in her notebook. Ma'am, at 15,000 feet, reduce speed to 0.65 Mach. That's our optimal glide speed for this weight and configuration. How do you know our weight? Marcus asked sharply. I heard the fuel load during pre-flight briefing. 42,600 pounds fuel. Boeing 737-800 operating empty weight is 91,300 pounds. Passenger count 191 plus 7 crew. Average weight 170 pounds per person including bags. Total aircraft weight approximately 172,000 pounds. Lily recited the numbers without hesitation. Marcus checked the aircraft computer. She's within 200 pounds. How the hell? My father made me calculate weight and balance for every flight I ever observed, Lily said simply. It's automatic now. 48 miles, Marcus called. 20,000 feet. The mountains were behind them now. The plain stretched endlessly ahead. Somewhere in that haze was Denver International Airport. Their only hope. At 10,000 feet, we'll need to configure for landing, Lily continued. Flaps 5 initially. That gives us better lift to drag than full flaps too early. We'll go flaps 30 at 5,000 feet. Rebecca felt sweat running down her back despite the cool cockpit. Lily, I need you to understand something. If we fall short, if we crash, I don't want you to blame yourself. You're just a kid. This isn't your responsibility. Ma'am, my father told me this moment would come, Lily said quietly. 2 years ago, he said someday I'd be on an aircraft when disaster struck. He made me promise I'd be ready. He made me promise I'd save everyone. Her voice wavered slightly. I made him that promise at his grave. I'm keeping it. Marcus wiped his eyes quickly. 42 miles. 18,000 feet. We're holding the profile. Denver Center, United 872, we have you on radar. Current glide path shows you'll be extremely tight on altitude. Advise if you need immediate emergency landing site options short of Denver International. Negative, Center, Rebecca replied. We're committed to Denver International. No other options. 15,000 feet now. Marcus announced. Reduce speed. Rebecca eased back slightly on the yoke, bleeding airspeed carefully. The aircraft slowed from 520 miles per hour to 440. The descent rate increased slightly. 38 miles. 14,000 feet. Lily's eyes never left the instruments. You're doing perfectly, ma'am. Hold this speed exactly. We're on profile. Sarah's voice again, Captain, passengers are crying. Some are praying. What are our actual chances? Rebecca didn't answer. She couldn't. Lily spoke instead, her child's voice somehow reaching through the intercom. Tell them Colonel David Chen's daughter says we're going to make it. Tell them I promised my father. Tell them I keep my promises. In the cabin, 191 passengers heard an 11-year-old girl's voice making an impossible promise. Some cried harder. Some stopped crying entirely. A few began to believe. 32 miles. 12,000 feet. The airport was visible now. A distant smudge on the horizon. So close. So impossibly far. Lily, Rebecca whispered. Are we going to make it? The little girl studied her calculations one final time. Her fingers traced the numbers. Her lips moved silently. When she looked up, her brown eyes behind the wire-rimmed glasses were absolutely certain. Yes, ma'am. We're going to make it. But it's going to be very, very close.